really now want to talk about motor. I really now want to talk about muscles.
Cool.
So you've talked about postural control. You've talked about sphincters. You've talked about like a whole lot of things that have to do
I
with
know.
muscles.
I
But
know.
most of us
So
pay attention to. What are we talking about here?
yeah, and I think again, that's something that just a lot of us take for granted. We go and sit on the toilet and we don't really have to think much about what our body is doing. So throughout childhood, we kind of think about that infant. What's their core look like? Not much, right? All that body is doing is just kind of laying, or it's being supported really heavily. And so we see this kind of nice dome belly, the little baby Buddha belly that we all love, right? And it's because that core hasn't really started to develop yet, because it doesn't need to sit up. It doesn't need to have bowel control. None of that stuff is developing yet. But our developmental milestones that we see from a motor perspective are all lining up. And so that's why, there is a big kind of a push for toilet training at younger ages. And there's something to that. And some people have been successful. But I think that the root of it is our bodies aren't ready for that yet. And it's because we're talking about two kind of primary muscles when we're talking about kind of that control of the sphincter. We're mostly talking about the diaphragm, which most people know helps us breathe. And we're talking about the pelvic floor. And there's lots of little muscles that make up the pelvic floor, but for all purposes here, it looks like a little bowl that sits like this in your pelvis. And then the diaphragm sits in your chest above it like this. And they work together. When one contracts, the other relaxes, and vice versa, to kind of create a pump in your stomach. But the end of it is that I need to be able to have that pelvic floor relax so that urine can pass through it, or that bowel can pass through it, right? And so if I am sitting on top of the toilet and it is taking all of my core strength, and I'm sitting like this and I'm so tense because it's just taking all of my energy and effort to sit like that, I am not going to be successful in relaxing that pelvic floor to be able to release anything, right? If you think about, again, I'm the poop lady. If you think about if you're a little bit constipated and you're sitting there and you're all tight, that's not going to work, is it? That's going to be really painful. We need to figure out how to relax that belly. So we do work with a lot of like breathing exercises and stuff that help that diaphragm move more efficiently and help get all that core musculature engaged so that we can have that relaxation of the pelvic floor. And on the flip side, that pelvic floor needs to be strong so that it can kind of stay contracted for longer periods of time, right? So that we don't see leakage and it holds that in. So we're going to have little relaxations, but not the big full relaxation.
Okay, well, that makes total sense. And yeah, I think like I really appreciate you and giving us all this multifaceted now like perspective on all the different components of this, because I think a lot of us probably don't think about or really didn't realize or recognize all these different component pieces, and how if one, they all are interdependent, and yet at the same time, if one of them goes offline for a reason, you're going to have this domino effect that is important to, I guess, to keep in mind.